Okay, so this is the third video in the Welcome to the Boardroom series that I'm creating. And I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about what goes on behind the closed doors, how board appointments really work in reality, really helping you understand the board appointment process. I've been recruiting board directors for 20 years and I've seen a few things. I've seen the informal and the formal processes and how it all works. And so I'm going to give you my unique insights into this whole process. 90% of board roles are unadvertised. They don't show up on job boards. They literally all happen behind the scenes through the business networks. And I can't emphasize this enough to you because most people that I deal with and come across with on a day-to-day basis are focused on the advertised board market. And that really is a very limited part of the market. It's also important to understand where the board roles sit in the market. So a lot of people, when they think about board roles, they think about the ASX. The reality is that there's only about 80 roles that come up each year in the listed business environments. Now that can surge a little bit in years where we have a high number of retirements, but the reality is that's not where the vast majority of people start with their board careers. And it's actually where most people don't actually play. I mean, it is a very limited cohort that will go on to serve in ASX listed organisations. So the vast majority of people that I come into contact are serving on the private side of the equation, or they're serving in the not-for-profit or the government sort of part of the market. Now, on those sides of the equation, there are literally thousands upon thousands of board roles available. So there's an incredible opportunity to serve. Almost every organisation over a certain size, certain revenue number will have, at least an advisory board or a formal board of directors. There are two types of board roles. There are advisory board roles, there are committee roles, and there are also non-executive director roles, formal roles where you're listed with ASIC, you are a responsible officer of the company. So, there is a huge opportunity, and I think by understanding the types of roles that exist and understanding the board recruitment process, it will assist you greatly. Now, there are some quite valid portals, if you like, where board roles are advertised, and probably the peak one for that would be the AICD, the company director organisation. That's the pinnacle organisation in the country. They do have a very good director opportunity board where they showcase some roles. But increasingly we find that the vast majority of the roles on that board are unpaid or volunteer, expenses only type roles. If you're looking for the commercial end of the spectrum, if you're looking for commercial paid roles, you're going to be looking more towards the business communities, your personal networks, your relationships with accountants and lawyers, and potentially with the search firms who might be handling these types of appointments. The vast majority of roles come about through networks, through recommendations. So typically what happens is the board has a vacancy. They will ask the board members, do you know anyone valid who could come forward and step onto the board? They will look at their committees and look at their advisory boards and see if there's anyone in the talent pool around that business that could step up. That is where most of the board appointments come from. And if that is the case, then that says to you that you must have relationships with board members on organisations that you would like to join and look for an entryway into that sort of ecosystem, if you like, whether that be through the committee work or through an advisory board to crack into those organisations. That is how the vast majority of roles come about. So it may be still quite a formal process. There may be a selection committee established. 2 or 3 board members might go onto that committee and be in charge of recruiting for new board members. I was just recently on a not-for-profit board, and this is exactly how it played out. So, the board had a discussion that they had 2 vacancies coming up. There was a committee assembled. I was one of the committee members because I have a board search practice. I was able to, advertise, bring in some talent, bring in some lists for the organisation to consider. The organisation also considered all their own personal networks and referred them into the process. We did a long list, then we did a short list, and then eventually we had some meetings and interviews, and we appointed 2 directors. So this is how most of these appointments come about. Executive search firms are often where everyone goes and sort of approaches, and often they approach too early. And my strong advice is to keep your powder dry and not necessarily approach the executive search firms too quickly. Now, search firms, for the vast majority, also handle C-suite roles. So they're typically doing, your CEO, your CFO type appointments. And then they have board search as an adjunct. And the reason for that is that it's typically quite a small component of their overall executive search practice. And, the reality is it's not as lucrative financially as the C-suite part of the equation. Now, that's important to understand because you need to get the paradigm right. Some of these search firms will literally only do 20 to 30 board appointments a year. And they've got thousands upon thousands of candidates on their database. So for you to even sort of come through and try and get onto their radar for board search assignments is pretty limited. You would have a better chance if maybe they've placed you into a C-suite role and maybe they've got to know you over a period of time. And this is the reality with search firms. You need to have forged relationships over a long period. Now, that doesn't mean you can't start that process and get in touch and start to get onto the radar of the search firms or of the researchers that serve in those firms. But it's a long game, and it's not where you start. And this is where you've got to understand the whole, how it works behind the closed doors. You really want to be getting into the networks as early as possible and focused on the business networking. So I want you to think about researching 3 organisations that you would love to be on the board of, and I want you to think about who serves on those boards. I want you to map out those key relationships. I want you to have a look at your own LinkedIn network, how you could connect to the correct people, because this is really going to make a huge difference to your success. It's going to enable you to connect in with the right people at the right time. At the heart of your strategy is going to be business networking, connecting in with the conduits, whether that be the search firms, whether that be the accounting, legal firms, the advisory firms, the people who are making recommendations behind the scenes. You're going to think about existing board directors that are in your network, and you're going to want to get connected in with them. And you might be using a thought leadership strategy as part of that approach to get in touch. Now, you will see things pop up in your networks from time to time. You will see things advertised in a soft or an informal way, and there will be some opportunities to put forward an application. But my strong advice is to sort of stop and think about what you're doing first before you rush off. If you apply for a role and you don't know anyone on that board of directors, your chances of being shortlisted are about 0%. Look, I might be being a bit harsh there. Maybe we say 0 to 5% chance of being shortlisted. So that's an incredibly low strike rate. What I say to a lot of my clients is when you see a role advertised that you would love to apply for, just stop for a moment and map out who is on the board, map out where your relationships sit, go and do your research and start to follow the organisation. And the time might not be quite right to apply for that role. You might want to wait and wait for the next opportunity, but use it as an opportunity to do your research and to map the organisation out. Alternatively, you can start to reach out to maybe a couple of the key people on the board. Maybe you've got a mutual relationship with one of the board members, and you can ring them and ask them and say, look, do you think it's worth applying for the role? Can you tell me a little bit more about the organisation or the challenges that you're facing, and try and get a little bit of intel before you put your formal application in. Once you put the application in, you can't go and do that, because that could be perceived as lobbying for the position and it can be frowned upon. But you really want to make sure you know who's on the board of directors. Now, I'll tell you a secret. When I talk to clients and they've applied for roles and they're kind of complaining that they haven't been able to secure a meeting or an opportunity, I ask them, well, who was on the board of directors? And there's always this crickets, the silence at the end of the phone line or the video call. They often don't even know who was on the board of directors, and yet they're complaining that they didn't get shortlisted. So, this is a real rookie error. And if you are going to play in this space, you're going to play professional, you're not going to play the amateur game. So it's going to be really crucial that you understand the paradigm, you get networked first, focus on the networking. And I have clients who literally just spend a year focus on business networking, connecting in with chairs, non-execs, committee members, selection committee members, connecting in with the partners in the Big Four, or connecting in with various sort of partners in private equity and venture capital. And that's all they do for a year. And as a result, they get invited into recruitment processes. So this is how the game works. It's focusing on the unadvertised board search market. As I said, at least 90%, if not more, of this part of the market is unadvertised. And that's why you've got to really think about your strategy, and you must understand how board appointments truly work and how it operates behind the closed doors.